First, most importantly, Mobile Fidelity has been sued. There's a class action pending against Mobile Fidelity for fraud and misleading statements in connection with the fact that many people thought its products were AAA, but they turn out to have a digital transfer step in them. Interesting, because a class action is a kind of lawsuit where the rights and obligations of similarly situated people are adjudicated together collectively. It'll be interesting to see if this class action gets certified, which would be the next step in that judicial process. Secondly, there was an interesting question and answer session between the Absolute Sound and Jim Davis, who owns Music Direct and Mobile Fidelity. Absolute Sound apparently emailed questions to Jim Davis, and Jim Davis responded in writing. The bottom line of this question and answer session was for us all to understand that Mobile Fidelity is now claiming that the reason they used a digital transfer step was because it sounded best to them all along. I want to quote exactly. These excerpts are from Jim Davis's answers to Jonathan Valens and Robert Harley's questions in MoFi President Jim Davis Addresses the Digital LP Mastering Controversy. So Jim Davis answers, quote, counterintuitively, this capture, meaning digital capture, yields in our evaluation superior sonics compared to a cut that is direct from the analog tape to the lathe, unquote. Quote, we did extensive evaluations of all aspects of the mastering process and found that using our proprietary gear with these steps yields the best sonic results, close quote. So Mobile Fidelity's position is now that they were doing digital all along to maximize sound quality for customers. Well, if this is the case, why didn't they trumpet the sonic superiority of their digital reissues over AAA issues in their marketing literature? Why didn't they lead with this wonderful benefit to buying a Mobile Fidelity reissue as a major sales point, as a competitive advantage over other reissue houses issuing merely AAA? I find the new strategy to be probably a legal position in light of the lawsuit, and I find it incredibly disingenuous. In fact, let's compare it to the original Mobile Fidelity mea culpa a couple of weeks ago, which was posted on Instagram, which I personally think has a very different tone and feel and emphasis. There, Mobile Fidelity said, we at Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab are aware of customer complaints regarding use of digital technology in our mastering chain. We apologize for using vague language, allowing false narratives to propagate, and for taking for granted the goodwill and trust our customers place in the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab brand. We recognize our conduct has resulted in both anger and confusion in the marketplace. Moving forward, we are adopting a policy of 100% transparency regarding the provenance of our audio products. It sure seems like there's been a change of strategy somewhere along the way between that very conciliatory, so sorry we allowed these misleading impressions to go on, versus, oh no, we used digital all the way along because we knew it sounded best. Well, again, I think it's completely ludicrous, because if that were true, why wouldn't they have used their superior sonics arising from the digital transfer step as their main advertising benefit and competitive advantage against other reissue products? Third, the questions that Absolute Sound asked Jim Davis, I personally found to be oddly softball given the nature of what's gone on. For example, Robert and Jonathan asked Jim Davis, quote, the revelation that MoFi cuts from digital masters has suggested to many that the advantages of a purely analog chain are imaginary. How do you reply to that line of thinking? Suggesting that the advantages of an analog chain are purely imaginary sure doesn't sound very Harry Pearson to me, and it doesn't sound like typical Absolute Sound. It's a little disturbing to learn that Mobile Fidelity and Music Direct advertise regularly in the Absolute Sound. So where are hard questions about, are you aware that this has been misleading people for years? Why did you hide this? Why did you release year after year incredibly misleading pictorials describing the one-step process? A little disturbing that Absolute Sound, in my opinion, went pretty soft on these Jim Davis questions. Fourth, Ultra-disc one-step prices on eBay have fallen precipitously. No longer asking multiples of the original purchase price by buying it through Mobile Fidelity Direct of $100 or $125 and asking hundreds of dollars for these Ultra-disc one-steps. The market for Ultra-disc one-step, the prices seem to be dropping precipitously, at least on eBay. We have even seen some Ultra-disc one-steps being offered for sale at the original Mobile Fidelity asking price. Fifth, Michael Fremer. I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, that I am a huge fan of Michael's. I credit him eternally with keeping alive the analog and the vinyl faith during the dark days of digital. I greatly value his intellectually honest reviews. He is one of the few reviewers who continues to conduct and write about comparative reviews. And very importantly as well, he is one of the few reviewers who does not believe in long-term loans. Michael buys all of his own components except for cables. So with that said, doesn't mean we can't ask some hard questions. In a recent video Michael posted, he says, quote, 90% of the time I can hear it, meaning a digital step, and I've said it. So let me say again, quote, 90% of the time I can hear it, and I've said it, referring to his ability to hear a digital step in a vinyl album 90% of the time. Michael goes on to say, with respect to the Mobile Fidelity products, I never suspected that they were cut from digital. I heard something I didn't like. I thought it was maybe only EQ related. Well, if Michael didn't suspect that the Mobile Fidelity releases had a digital step, does that suggest that the Mobile Fidelity releases are in the 10% subset, the 10% bucket of products where he's not able to distinguish analog from digital, or AAA from the product having a digital step? Or alternatively, is Michael suggesting, well, I knew I heard something I didn't like, and in fairness, Michael has written numerous negative reviews saying he doesn't care for the sound of some of the Mobile Fidelity releases. So he has said that to his credit, but he's always thought it was something other than some digital step. So is it fair to suggest that Michael didn't know it was a digital step because Mobile Fidelity, by fooling all of us and misleading us with their statements and charts, effectively foreclosed a digital step as a suspect for the poor sound Michael was reporting on the Mobile Fidelity products. Item 2, Mobile Fidelity is not the only culprit. It turns out that Impex was doing a digital step as well, at least on some of their most popular titles. With respect to Saturday Night in San Francisco, the Al Di Meola title, very famous album, the original Impex description of the mastering process said, quote, assembled from the original 16-track analog live session tapes. The new wording says, quote, assembled from a direct-to-DXD 32-bit 384 kilohertz transfer of the original 16-track analog live session tapes. So Impex was doing it too. Very frustrating and very disappointing. On to a more fun topic, audio reviewing. A dear friend of mine has fine F112 loudspeakers, and he is mainly digital. He uses a very wonderful sounding MSB reference DAC and a Music First passive preamp. I've helped him audition numerous amplifiers against his in-house reference amplifier, the linear tube audio push-pull tube amps, which I happen to think in his system sound absolutely wonderful, and they are my favorite amps so far in his system. But he borrowed from Gary Leeds, who is the importer of a very interesting new brand, WestminsterLab. Apparently, a 37-year-old audio designer from Hong Kong released a sliding Class A bias, 100 watt into 8 ohms, relatively small monoblock solid state amplifiers, and my friend was very interested to try them. So Gary Leeds had them sent over, and my friend invited me over for a listen. I was very pleasantly surprised with these WestminsterLab REI amplifiers is the model name. They were unusually warm sounding and full, and very much not solid statey sounding. I personally don't cotton to the more sort of bolder, cooler slightly clinical spectrum of electronics, so I tend to prefer things on the warmer side. And these were among the most natural sounding and non-solid state sounding solid state amplifiers I have ever heard in my life. The other one being the First Watt SIT3, which I and many other people find to have an interestingly kind of single-ended triode type of fullness to it. And similarly, I found these WestminsterLab REI amps to be resolving, to have a little bit less liquidity than the linear tube audio amp, but that makes sense because I personally love tubes for that sense of liquidity that I believe tubes give you. But the WestminsterLab amp was highly resolving and yet warm and full, minus a little bit of liquidity that I enjoyed from the linear tube audio amps. But they are actually my second favorite amp that I have heard on my friend's fine F112s. Please check in the description below for the links to What's Best, where we are discussing right now these specific topics on What's Best. And please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week.